Hey everyone, I'm making this video because I want to talk about my 5 favorite things to do on my Google Pixel Fold. Now I want to be very clear that when I say the 5 favorite things to do, I don't mean that these are the 5 things that I do most often with this phone, and I don't even mean that these are the 5 things I do every day on this phone. What I mean is that with these 5 features, once I started doing them on this phone, I realized how much I hated doing them on other phones, and now I only want to do them here. Of course, I'm not just going to mention off a bunch of things that I love doing on this phone. I am also going to talk about a few of the weaknesses or just a couple of things that I think could be improved. Really the main thing that's holding this phone back from being an even better and more competitive folding phone. Now, the first thing that I started doing and I really started to like about this phone was when I was creating and editing documents, I realized how much better it was here than on other devices. Now, normally when you're looking at, say, like a resume or any other sort of Word document, everything is a little jammed together. This isn't how this is going to look when the document's actually printed out. I mean, you can see just kind of how messed up some of this stuff is. But when I have the phone unfolded and we get this wider screen format, I can see what it's actually going to look like when I print it. You don't have everything smushed together and you can actually make out what it is that you're working on and how it's going to look. Something that you don't normally do on a phone. Typically when it comes to editing a document, you would want to have a computer or a laptop or something like that. But if you don't have money to have a bunch of multiple devices, this is definitely something that you can do on a phone like this, and it's something you're actually going to enjoy doing. Now, this is one of those features that I didn't really notice any limitations or anything like that. I mean, when it comes to creating and editing documents, the real trick here isn't that there's anything this phone is doing that's that much different compared to other phones like a standard iPhone. It's just that you have a wider screen and you have more real estate. That's what makes it so much easier to do, and that's what makes it more enjoyable. So I don't really see a need for any improvements when it comes to creating and editing documents, whether it's Word docs, PDF files, or whatever it is you're working on. It just works well as it is. The next thing is going to be the multitasking feature. Now, this one is kind of a no-brainer when it comes to any folding phone. It's just really nice to be able to run 2 apps side by side with one another. And how you do it here, you can go ahead and open one app, then you go and you find the other app that you want to open. Hold it, and then it will give you the option to go ahead and click this button here, which will allow you to split screen, and then click another recently opened app to split screen with. You can also kind of bring the little home bar up, and then you can go through your app drawer and kind of pick whatever you want, but this is my favorite way to do it. Now, what I usually like to do is just look for Pokemon Go raids here, and then send them here. Now, this is really, really useful, but one thing I did notice, and I might not be able to get it to do it, but it just seems like it runs a little bit slower when it's trying to run 2 apps at the same time. I think using the Tensor G2, also 12 gigabytes of RAM, I just don't know if that's quite enough. It does feel like enough most of the time, and I'm not really noticing a lot of issues now, and everything looks good. But when I am trying to actually send a request to do a raid, that's when I start to notice that it maybe just goes a little bit slower. Though I will say right now, it is doing a really good job of letting me run both apps and not slowing down. But this is something that I think will be improved when we get the Tensor G4 or G3, whichever chip they're going to put in here next. As of right now, multitasking is awesome on this phone. Whether you're doing it for productive reasons or just for gaming reasons, having both of these apps right next to each other is extremely useful. But it is something that they could improve. I know some phones let you run more than 2 apps at the same time, where this does not. This is just 2. You can't do 3 apps at once. Another strange thing about this device is it's kind of stuck in the orientation it likes. It wants to have one app on this side and the other app on this side. If you turn it sideways, then they both go landscape. Now that kind of is nice because maybe you want to use apps that, are more landscape than portrait together. But it would be nice just to have a little bit more control. Really all I can do here is I can double tap this middle bar and it will let me switch them. But I can't have both apps run side by side this way, which would be nice because sometimes I want to have a longer portrait for some apps, especially like Pokemon Go. But, in this case, it works well. Maybe just one of those things that it just needs a couple of improvements. But as it is right now, I wouldn't want to do any sort of multitasking on any other phone other than a folding phone. You can also toggle the slider back and forth like this, so you can adjust how much screen real estate is given to each app. Or whenever you're done, you can just close out and focus on the one app you want to be on. What I really like to do when it comes to gaming, is use the inner display. Games like Clash of Clans just look amazing, and it's not just the fact that you have a longer screen to do it with, but it's all this extra real estate you get up here where you can really see everything. Now, I've showed this off before in the gaming video that I did before where I was talking about all the cool gaming features that's on this phone, but let me go ahead and show you what I'm talking about specifically with Clash of Clans. So here it is on a 7.6-inch inner display on the Pixel Fold, and then I'm going to cut and I'm going to go ahead and show you what it's going to look like on the Pixel 8 Pro, and you're going to notice that even though it does look good on the Pixel 8 Pro, you have a pretty big screen for it, it's a little thinner, and it kind of cuts off some of this top and bottom part here. That's what makes this so much fun to use, is that this is closer to an actual square. It isn't technically a square, this is still a rectangular display, but it's not only wider, it's also taller, so you just get more in all dimensions. It's not just a longer screen or a taller screen, it's a bigger screen all the way around, and it is super useful for gaming, all kinds of games, whether it's basic games like this, or even some of the more intensive games like when I was running Call of Duty in the last gaming video that I made. Of course, not all games are made equal. I think that's why I like being able to click this button here, and I can go in and I can edit the aspect ratio. Now, this isn't unique to Google. A lot of folding phones have some sort of aspect ratio setting where you can go in and control what you're using, whether it's half screen, full screen, or default. But even some apps, I'm going to show you like Pokemon Go. When I'm running at default and I go back to the app, it still doesn't seem right. I'll kind of show you. It just feels like I'm missing some things up here and maybe down here. It feels a little bit shorter. It doesn't feel like how it should or how it would on a regular size phone like a Pixel 8 Pro. Again, I'm going to go ahead and show you on screen what I'm talking about because it just looks a little bit bigger on the taller, skinnier screens. I think that's something that could easily be fixed. It would just, kind of give us more black space here on the sides to make this skinnier, but I personally think it would be worth it. And of course, I could always go like this and get a bigger screen out of it. But even here, when I'm like going through and looking at Pokemon, it just looks a little zoomed in for my taste. I don't know, maybe I'm being picky here, but it feels like there's some space down here that's missing for me. Now, typically when it comes to video editing on this phone, I like to do the editing here, even though I do the shooting here with the Pixel 8 Pro. So what I do is I'll film with the Pixel 8 Pro, and then I'll sync it up with Google Photos, download them on this phone, and then when I'm actually creating and editing the video, I use it in the inner display so it's wider. I can see everything a lot more clearly. However, something strange can happen depending on the app that you're using when you go between the cover display and the inner display, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So here we are on TikTok, and let's say I want to go and I want to create something. So go over and click this button here, right? Oh, double chin. And just, things are they're all right now, but let me go ahead. All right, this photo right here, right? So everything's looking good. Then when I close it, okay, everything's still looking good. So that's good. Oh, except now things are a little off-centered. You can kind of see there's a black bar there. Open it back up, it looks fine. Close it back. Yeah, and see, it's just, you can notice black space here, black space here, even though I'm switched over and the buttons and everything are in the right place and it looks like the app is doing all right, the footage that I'm working with does not look all right. And I don't know if I post this how it's going to look, if it's going to be all messed up, if it's going to be off center, or if it's going to be perfectly normal. Let me go to just save this draft. Okay, now we're back to normal. Everything's looking good. Let's go back. Oof, not the best look. Drafts, here we go. Boom, still like that. Got to close out the app, go back, TikTok, profile, drafts. Okay, and now it's back to normal. But, again, if I go like this, and then I go back, now everything's fine. You see, it's really weird, it's inconsistent, and there are moments where, it kind of messes me up a little bit. Now, it's not a big deal. I haven't really noticed this being an issue, especially when I'm using other things like InShot. That's one of the apps that I use for video editing. But when I'm in an app like this, like TikTok, where, I do make a lot of shorts, it can be a little strange, and it can take a little bit of extra time to close out the app, reopen it, just because I'm not confident if the footage I'm about to post is going to look centered and normal on other people's screens, or if my foldable is messing it up. Now, I think this is just something that, as they continue to work on this phone, they'll probably catch stuff like this and they'll probably make changes to make it a little bit better. I mean, that's what they have been doing. They've released a lot of updates to improve this phone, but it's definitely one of those things that right now I would say needs improvement. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about, and probably my favorite thing about this phone, something I've never even really cared about before, are making wallpapers. Also, the use of widgets on this phone. So obviously the great thing here, I've already stated it, is just opening it up and getting a lot more out of your photos, especially if you like to take a lot of photos in landscape. You can now actually enjoy them on your phone because when you open it up, you get that nice landscape view. One thing I do have to complain about when it comes to the wallpapers though, is that you can't have a separate wallpaper for the inner display and the cover display. Instead, what they have is you can do separate wallpapers for the home screen and the lock screen like you would on normal phones. We need to have a separate cover display and a separate inner display wallpaper just so we can really appreciate this more. Right now, the best way to enjoy your wallpapers is to have a very nice landscape photo that has a good subject in the center. That way, when you're on the cover display, you can enjoy it. And then when you go to the inner display, you can enjoy it even more. Finally, widgets. Now, I didn't really use widgets a whole lot, unless, of course, you're talking about the widgets that were on the cover display for the Samsung Z Flips. Those were useful. But when it comes to a home screen like this, I never really wanted to have widgets out because I felt like it was just kind of crowding everything. I felt like I had limited space on a phone, so I didn't really want to have a bunch of widgets everywhere. But because of how much space is here on this device, I don't really mind it. And I actually like using some of that extra space to use these widgets just because I get more detail without actually having to open up an app. Move these over here. I'm just kind of cleaning up. This is where I had them earlier before I made this video. But see, it's just a little more useful. I can still see a lot of what's over here. It still feels pretty open and not as cluttered, but I do have a lot of things going on here. My screen time, my weather, some of my notes, some news, things like that. It's just very useful to use widgets with all this extra screen space. When I was using an iPhone before, I didn't really like having widgets up just because it felt too crowded and it felt like there was too much going on such a small display. But here, it does feel a little more like having a little desktop computer in my pocket. So I do enjoy having the widgets and having these applications running so I can see some of these other features without getting into an actual application. Now, with all that being said, there are a lot of great things to do on this phone, and there are a lot of things that are more enjoyable to do on this phone versus a regular slab phone. But these were the 5 things that I felt needed to be talked about the most, just because they were the things that I really noticed were significantly improved just by having the bigger screen. Now, I did mention some things that were kind of holding it back, and I think what I could do to summarize that is just say that the thing holding this phone back is experience. It is the first generation foldable. Now, I know there was another first generation foldable that came out around the same time, the OnePlus Open, and that one did a lot of things right that this phone didn't get right, but still, for a first generation foldable, I think this is awesome. It's also awesome because you can go into some random retail carrier or a Best Buy, and you can actually see this phone on display. You can get a hold of it, you can take a look at it, and you can really see it in person before buying it, so it may not feel as risky to just go out and buy this phone, because you can get your hands on it first, and you're probably going to run into more people who actually have it, especially here in the US. But in time, I do think a lot of these things will improve. A lot of the issues seem to just be more optimization, making apps work with the bigger screens, and we have seen that Google has been trying to get more apps to format their screens for tablets. In fact, when I'm in the Google Play Store and I'm looking around, there are tabs that will say, hey, these games here are formatted for your phone really well. I know both Minecraft, Doom, some of those games were the ones that were showed off to me, even Stardew Valley. So there are a lot of great things to do on this device. I think we just need more time with the foldables and with the tablets. They will get more mainstream appeal, and the things that I've been talking about here will improve in time. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and enjoyed me talking about the things I love doing most with this device. If you have any questions, please leave them down below, or if there's anything that you think I got wrong or might have left out, please go ahead and add it to the discussion and then we can kind of talk a little bit more. I do enjoy talking to you guys, and I do love seeing that my videos are still getting comments. It's definitely really cool, and I feel like they're getting more attention than I thought they would. But anyways, you guys have a wonderful night. I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you again. Bye-bye.